Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about Apple because Apple is lying to you. And hear me out here. This is what's going on. Apple's marketing and legal teams seriously need to get on the same page. One of these teams is correct and the other is lying. They can't both be right. So let's dive in. This is coming from ThreatPost. Now, Apple is basically using the growing threat of malware on its Mac platform as a defense in a lawsuit that could force the company to open up new channels of applications for its mobile iOS platform. iOS is the operating system that runs iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV. Now, in testimony in a California court yesterday, on Wednesday, Apple's head of software engineering, Craig Federighi, called the level of malware threat against the Mac platform one that the company finds quote-unquote unacceptable and continues to defend against it with restrictive application distributing platforms, according to a published report on CNET. Basically, what they are saying is that they are under a threat of malware, and so they are basically really ramping up the security and being very stringent on how they're filtering the App Store. Now, Federighi's comments were made as Apple executives began testifying in a court case basically that Epic Games brought, through the makers of Fortnite, against the tech giant for what Epic views as restrictive policies on the iOS App Store. That's the App Store for your iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV. Now, proceedings in the case began earlier this month in the United States District Court, Northern District of California, and top Apple executives were testifying to defend their side in court this week. Now, throwing basically the security of its own platform under the bus isn't about face for Apple, which for years boasted the security of Mac over basically Windows. The company even began running popular comedic television advertising campaigns illustrating this point in 2006. I remember that was Justin Long, and I cannot remember, Hodges, something like that. Like, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC, and always the PC. I had all these troubles, and he was the nerd, and Justin Long was the cool guy. But one of those was, well, if you're on a Apple, you're on a Mac, you're not getting infections, and the PC was always infected. That was the marketing hype. But for years, it was certainly true that PC suffered for the bulk of malware, while Mac remained more secure. But that has changed, and that's and for the record, that was largely due to the proprietary nature of the Mac operating system. Windows was a lot more open to allow a lot more hardware and software on there, and therefore that got it in trouble. Mac was a very closed system. You had much more limited options on a Mac than you did on a Windows computer, basically by virtue of hardware and software you could get. Now, while all of the software on an Apple machine was more or less vetted by Apple and only could be used on computers sold by the company, the use of Windows on different hardware platforms and essentially it being ubiquitous made it an open playing field for attackers. But now the malware threat landscape has changed with the explosion of iPhone, iPad, and mobile devices, and Apple is now under attack, according to Federighi. This is why security remains a primary focus for Apple and why it should basically be able to continue its strict management of the software via the App Store, including policies that are basically at the center of the Epic lawsuit. This is his logic. This is Federighi, the Apple executive's logic. Now, attackers have certainly been finding ways to exploit both Mac, like MacBooks, for example, and iOS, iPhone and iPad, etc., in unprecedented ways in recent years, with the company patching vulnerabilities and making security fixes as fast as they can find them. Earlier this month, Apple released 4 unscheduled updates for iOS, that's again iPhone and iPad, macOS, that is obviously the MacBook and any other Mac in your ecosystem, and watchOS, that is the wristwatch that you wear, to basically add security patches on flaws in its WebKit browser engine. A week before that, Apple then patched a 0-day vulnerability in its macOS that can bypass critical anti-malware capability, in which a variant of the notorious Mac threat Schlayer adware was already exploiting for several months. So 2021 has obviously been less than a stellar year for Apple in terms of security. The company kicked off this year by removing contentious macOS features that allowed some Apple apps to bypass content filters, VPNs, and third-party firewalls. They quickly followed that up with an emergency update to patch 3 0-day vulnerabilities discovered in iOS after a major software update in November of last year, already basically fixing 3 that were being actively exploited. Prior to that, in 2020, there was a flurry of Apple patches for zero-day flaws in iOS. Again, that's iPhone and iPad, including 2 that had apparently been abused for years. And so on one point, you have Apple testifying under oath in a massive lawsuit against the makers of Fortnite saying, well, we're under constant malware attack, so of course we're going to be very filtered and restrictive, and that's why Fortnite, or rather Epic Games, doesn't have a stance. On the same token, their marketing team for years, and it's not just back in the mid-2000s where they're saying, well, if you have a Mac, you're not going to get infected. We have been infecting Macs forever, on the same on basically the same wavelength. And while there were less infections because it was a much smaller population, much less attackers were targeting it, there is absolutely total proof that you could infect a Mac in the mid-2000s, in the 2010s, and now the 2020s, but their marketing hasn't changed. Basically, going in front of CES, I want to say in 2019, they put up huge billboards that said, basically what you do on your iPhone stays on your iPhone, touting that privacy, touting that security. In 2015, they basically removed all the antivirus from the App Store, saying that their new App Store vetting system was so good that you wouldn't need a third party. You take your pick of any of the traditional ones that you can think of, from McAfee to Symantec to all of these to others. They basically removed it. So if you go to the App Store and you look at a McAfee or a Symantec or any antivirus, note they don't actually hook into the operating system and scan the phone. They'll do a whole bunch of other things for you, but they don't scan for threat. This is the marketing lie that Apple continues to sell the entire population, and most of you believe it. And that's a huge problem. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into organizations. I literally was just on a podcast with this really cool guy named Marcus, where I was talking about this, saying, no, absolutely not. You need an antivirus on your MacBook, and you probably don't have it. And Marcus literally raised his hand in that and said, yeah, I'm one of those guys. This is the problem that we have. They have given you the illusion that you have just above and beyond security compared to other platforms out there, namely Windows, and it's a marketing ploy. We infect iPhones, iPads, MacBooks, and everything. You need good defensive structure in your life. They just proved it in court to avoid a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit. So their marketing now needs to step up and say the same thing. Otherwise, they are continuing to lie to the general population. So which is it, Mac? Which is it, Apple? Which is it, iPhone? Are you secure, or are you in bed with the rest of us that need good defensive measures like antivirus? And that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. And get an antivirus if you have a MacBook. Thanks, everyone.